Hi everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Not the Worst Knitting Podcast. My name is Michelle, and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind meeshyfrazz Knits. Today's episode is actually going to be about my most and least worn cozy winter knits. So today I'm here in Western Washington, and it's just a few days before Thanksgiving. I'm in the US, so I celebrate Thanksgiving this upcoming Thursday, which actually I realize by the time this airs will have already happened, but it's almost Thanksgiving here. And it is just the perfect cozy winter knit sweater kind of day. It's yet another overcast day. It's quite chilly out. I think it's like 39 degrees outside. And all I want to do right now is just pull for my big, chunky, cozy winter knits. So you might see I have a sweater behind me, which is the Weekender Light. That does not qualify. What qualifies for this video is basically anything that's DK weight or bulkier. So we're talking about like your chunkier knits, you know, your bigger gauge. Maybe you're holding more yarns together to make a warmer fabric. So you might see off to the side, you can sort of see my big stack of sweaters over here. They're so chunky and so many of them have like Suri in them that it's actually hard to even keep them from falling because they're very soft and slippery. But these are really my most and least worn. I've got a bunch of sweaters, but these are the ones I grab for the most and or the least, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about why on each one. I will also insert B-roll of me wearing them so you can see what it actually looks like on. I'm going to try and actually do this in order of most worn to least worn, but I will note that there are a couple in here where they might be placed in an order that I wouldn't necessarily do, only because some are older or newer. So like some of my newer ones are a little bit later on in because I haven't worn them quite as much, but I expect that I will wear them a lot. And so that might change, but I just felt like if I start with the ones that I'm always wearing and then just go down from like what I've worn a little bit less and less, that was kind of the order I thought would be appropriate for this. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started. Before I actually start trying them on, I do want to mention I have a 34-inch bust and I am 5.5 feet tall and I've got a pear shape. So those are the measurements that I think about when I am picking designs that I want to knit, when I'm thinking about the length that I want to knit them to, and about how much ease I want. Typically, I don't like to do a huge amount of ease. I'm okay with a little bit of ease, but I don't like to do a huge amount of ease because of my pear shape. But if I do choose to do a little bit more ease than usual, I will typically make it a little more cropped. I don't do like super high cropped, but I will crop it to where it hits just about, I'll be wearing high-waisted jeans and it'll just pass the line of my high-waisted jeans. So that way it's not hitting at my widest point. So you don't have that like tent sort of look. You still have a little bit of a break in the where it hits. And that's just my preference, so keep that in mind. And I'll talk about that with each of these when I try them on. So what I'm gonna do is put my first sweater on and then we'll get started. Okay, first on the list is my Monday sweater by Petite Knit. This is a sweater I wear a ton. It is just, it's a bit of an oversized top-down raglan. It's not super oversized, but it is meant to have a decent amount of ease. Yeah, so I knit size 1, which gave me about 7 to 8 inches of positive ease. The pattern calls for 6 to 8 inches of positive ease. I think I have like 7 inches of positive ease, and the pattern calls for 6 to 8 is where it's at. And like I said, this is just a top-down raglan pattern. It's got a folded over neckband. If I didn't say, this is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit. And this pattern is $7.33 on Ravelry. So let's see. The range in sizes, it has 9 sizes, which ranges from 105 to 166 centimeters, or 41.25 to 60.75 inch bust. So like I said, I knit the size 1, and that actually still gave me a decent amount of ease. Like I wouldn't have wanted more ease than this. But what you end up getting is like, it just feels like your proper like oversized sweatshirt that you just want to throw on. You're not looking for anything form-fitting. You're just looking for something cozy that just kind of drapes on you. And I really love this pattern. It was a very simple pattern to knit. The raglan, there's nothing too special about it. I think there's like a 2-stitch raglan here. And it gives you a little bit extra armhole depth. So it's not, the sleeves aren't super tight, but they're also not super large. It's just like a very basic sweatshirt kind of pattern. So the yarn I used, I held 2 yarns double, which is what she recommends for a DK weight. And so the first yarn I used is, let me see, what is this? It's Polka Dot Sheep Iron Horse. And this is in the color Bear Grass, which is basically like a nice white, like a winter white. And what I love about this base is that it's 75% merino and 25% mulberry silk. So it's really luxurious. It's quite drapey and it's got a nice sheen to it, which I think you can see pretty well in there. I'm actually going to, I have my little bag for where I can toss my yarn when I'm done talking about it. So if you want to, let me see, yeah, that is the label for Polka Dot Sheep. I've used Polka Dot Sheep a lot, really like a lot of their bases, really nice yarns. And then the yarn I held with it is actually Explorer Knits and Fibers Suri Alpaca. This is the only little bit I have left. And the colorway is Duomo. So I wrote down the yardage. For the Polka Dot Sheep Iron Horse, I used about 2.8 skeins, which is 1,227 yards. And then the Explorer Knits Suri Alpaca, I used 918 yards, which I think came out to be about 3 full skeins. So the fabric is incredible. It's so soft, it's beautiful, it's super luxe, super nice to wear. I did have some issues with the Explorer Knits Suri though, which I was really surprised about. Now I do want to mention first and foremost, like Explorer Knits is an indie dyed, hand dyed yarn, so you're going to have variation, like that's to be expected. And I always know that whenever I buy any indie dyed yarn that there's going to be some differences in the skeins. But what I wasn't really expecting was that the first skein I used, in the beginning, it was actually, the color was spread out really nicely. But then at the end of the skein, it was just like all the blue showed up, and it just, you can kind of see like right here, this was the end of the first skein, and it was just like a ton of blue all of a sudden. And then I picked up the second skein and there was no blue, none, like I mean nothing. Like there was no blue at all. And I was like, oh my God, it made this little pooling that much more obvious. So I knit the rest of that skein up, really wasn't any blue, attached the third skein, and it was the same. The third skein was a little bit more, it had a little bit of blue, like you can actually see where it came back, where the third skein is. It actually had some blue back in it, but that second skein like didn't really have any. And so you'll notice, you might be looking at this and being like, well, I still see blue on there. Well, that is because I duplicate stitched a bunch of blue from the Suri after I was done. So I finished the sweater, and like I said, the third skein had a little bit of blue here and there. And so I took my remaining ball of Suri and I literally cut all of the pieces that had blue in them just with the Suri, and I wove them in all through here. So all of this that you see, these are all duplicate stitched in. And I was a little irritated about that, but it will bother me. Like it would have bothered me if I just had this pooling right here and then no blue from here to here. Like that would have driven me crazy. So I didn't worry about it on the back, mostly maybe because I can't see it. I might have duplicate stitched a couple of pieces on the back just so it was a little bit uniform, but really I was just focused on making sure there was something here so it was a little bit more balanced. So I was a little surprised about that. I mean, like I said, it's gonna happen. It was my first time using Explorer Knits yarn and my first time using their Suri. So I don't know, like it's such a hyped yarn that I guess I went in thinking it was going to be, because I've heard the consistency with them is really good and I believe that it is. And so maybe it was just a weird batch. They were all the same dye lot, but you know, it's Suri that's got like flecks of blue, so it's bound to happen. Like there's nothing wrong with the yarn. And in fact, this, like I said, the fabric that this made is so dreamy and beautiful. But that was just something that I had to do. And luckily it wasn't bad that I just had to duplicate stitch the Suri because it's basically a lace weight, you know, it's so thin that it didn't add anything to the final fabric and you don't notice. It's not like you look at it and you're like, oh, that's thicker. Like, especially on here, I don't think you can even notice a difference. So it worked out okay, and I was lucky that I had enough of the skein left with blue pieces in it to where I could do that, and it looked okay. But other than that, no issues. I knit this exactly according to pattern. The pattern, it calls for you to use a US 4 or 3.5 millimeter for the ribbing. That's on the neckband and then the cuffs and hem, and then US 6 or 4 millimeters for the body. So this knit up very fast. And yeah, I basically knit this completely according to pattern and I love it. I wear this all the time. I don't think I would make any modifications. I love it just as is. The length is good. The sleeves are good. Like I said, the sleeves are, I don't know, it's like the perfect sleeve because it's just a normal, it's not oversized and it's not tight. Maybe I would bring in the cuff a little bit here, but that's like, I also don't know if it really matters because it has that perfect sweatshirt kind of feel. And that would be totally like a personal preference if I were to knit this again. And mostly just because I think I do like a tighter cuff. But really, like this is a great pattern, so easy, and it knits up super fast. Next up on the list is my Magnolia Bloom by Camilla Vad. This pattern is $8.80 on Ravelry. It is a top-down lace yoke pattern with baubles as well. So it's just lace and baubles, and it's just on the upper yoke, and then the rest of it is just knit in stockinette. This has a folded over neckband. So I knit the size 1, but I knit this with a bulkier yarn. So I believe, let me see, the pattern calls for worsted weight. I ended up using Luft by Woolfolk, which is a bulky weight, I believe. So I knew my gauge was going to be a little bit bigger, and that's why I opted to knit the size 1. And it calls for about 4 to 6 inches of positive ease, which I would say I'm probably around 4 inches of positive ease on this guy, and I absolutely love it. So the pattern comes in 6 sizes, and it ranges from 93 centimeters up to 142 centimeters, which is 36.5 inches up to a 56-inch bust. And so I knit the size 1, but I ended up, so a size 1 is supposed to be about 36.5 inches, but with my bulky weight gauge, I think I got closer to about 38 inches, maybe more, maybe 37 inches, but mine ended up a little bit bigger, which is what I wanted. The pattern calls for a US 10, which is 6 millimeter, and then a 7 millimeter needle, which there's not actually a US size for. I think when I ordered it, it might have actually been a US 10.75. So that's actually what you use for the body. The smaller needle is for the ribbing. So I will just note that if you want to try and match gauge and you are in the US, you might have to go looking for a special size. I had to actually custom order this through one of the local yarn stores here because it's not even a size that they carried on the shelf. Just because I don't know why that size isn't part of our list. I really don't understand the reasoning behind it, but yeah. So I ended up special ordering those needles, which I'm glad I have now because you never know when I might need them again, or you know, if I'm trying to meet gauge and I need somewhere in between those 2 sizes, it's nice to have the option. And so I knit outside of my yarn being a thicker gauge. I knit this completely according to pattern. I used Woolfolk Luft, and this is in the color L21, which is a pink. And I used 8 skeins, which came out, I ended up using about 795 yards for this. So it's quite a luxurious fabric that it makes. If you are familiar with Woolfolk yarn, then you will know that it is a very beautiful yarn. It's a bit of a pricey yarn, but it does make a beautiful fabric. Now I have worn this in a previous podcast episode, and I did mention this, that the one gripe I have with Woolfolk yarns, at least the ones that I have used, is that it's so soft and beautiful that it does pill quite a bit. And I think that's showing up pretty well. You can see that it does pill a lot. But at the same time, I also wear this a ton. I think there's something about the big, cozy, oversized nature of it all that it just makes me want to grab for it. And then the fact that it's really soft, that it's not scratchy at all, it's quite a luxurious, soft fabric. And then this detailing, it gives it such a femininity that even though it's an oversized sweater, it just feels really nice to wear. It feels very special. And there's something nice about it being like comfortable and sweatshirty, but also special and feminine. And so this one gets a lot of wear as well. And then even with the baubles up top, the baubles, they don't bother me. Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'm sort of hesitant with baubles. I like the way they look, but I worry about them being too big and too floppy. And the way that the baubles are done on here, I think works really nicely. It doesn't distract from the pattern. It's very much a design element that I think adds to the pattern. And so I'm really happy with the way that looks. Oh, I will mention, this was a joy to knit up, and it knits up very fast, but I will warn, at least when I knit this, which was a couple years ago, there were a few typos that I found in the pattern. I've knit both the Magnolia Bloom and then the actual Magnolia like Summer, and so I can't remember which is which, but one of them had just like typos and a couple of numbers were a little bit off. And then there was another one where it had actually like copied and pasted the exact same instructions twice in a row, I think without realizing it. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if maybe it's just like an English translation issue where there was like not a final edit done on those. But the pattern itself works out great, and like the numbers that you actually need for measuring and your stitch counts are all fine. So I just wanted to note that. But I love this sweater. I love the blush pink, even though I feel like this is a blush pink that I can sort of get away with. Like, yes, it does make me look a little bit pale, but I don't think it's like a sickly pale. There are certain, like peach, I cannot wear, but this blush pink, I just really love. It's just really soft and like that dusty pink, and I think it works really well with this pattern. So that means that I end up grabbing for this a lot. Like any chilly day, if I want to feel a little bit special, this is what I'm gonna wear, because you know, I can wear this on a Zoom call, I can go out in this, and I look really put together, but I'm so cozy. So I love this one. All right, number 3 on my list. If you have watched me before, then you will be familiar with this. This is my Prismatic Reflection Sweater by me. It is $9 on Ravelry, and this is a top-down raglan that is slightly oversized. It's meant to be kind of another like comfortable, cozy sweatshirty. It's like, it's not super oversized, but it's like a little oversized and cozy. And so the big highlight, I would say, on this pattern is that there is a slip stitch diamond cable motif, and it's very simple. It's just a slip stitch cable. It's nothing complicated, but it creates this diamond motif that is on the sleeves, on the front, and on the back. And when I was playing around with the idea of the slip stitches, I in my mind, I had the idea of stripes with it, just playing off of the whole idea, kind of like one of those old school striped sweaters, and then playing with the diamonds and the idea of like prisms. So I really wanted to do just really fun, bright colors. And also I wanted to use this as a way to use colors that maybe wouldn't be great on me, like next to my face, in a way where I could still have them in the sweater and they wouldn't make me look dreadful. Before I get into the yarn, I knit the size 2 for about 4 inches of positive ease. I recommend 3 to 4 inches of positive ease in this sweater. And it comes in 9 sizes, and it ranges from a 34-inch bust up to a 64.75-inch bust, which is 85 centimeters up to 162 centimeters. And it uses a US 5 needle, which is 3.75 millimeter for the ribbing, and then a US 7 or a 4.5 millimeter for the body. So this is another one that knits up super, super fast. Again, we've got the folded over neckband because, I don't know, there's something about cozy winter knits. I just love a good folded neckband. And it's not a huge neckband, it's just a nice little neckband here. And okay, yarn. So this is an interesting combination of yarns that I used. Way back in a very early episode, I talked about how when I was buying yarn just to kind of swatch with, I will go to Wool to Dye For, which is, so that's actually like a yarn dyer supplier. And so all you can get there are like bare natural yarns. But I really wanted to use natural, like a white natural yarn. And I don't know, I couldn't justify buying a natural undyed white yarn from a dyer and paying that markup for it. So I ended up buying like a 10-pack, and that 10-pack cost me what it would have cost to buy 3 skeins from a dyer. And when I was doing that, I also decided to buy this, it's called Natural Fluff 4-ply. Unfortunately, I don't have any with me now. I have one little skein left, but I lent it to my friend to swatch with. But the Natural Fluff and then the Krypton sock are the 2 main colors that are held together to create this DK weight fabric. And so this, like I said, this is the Krypton sock, also the Wool to Dye For, and this is just your typical 75-25 merino, superwash merino nylon sock yarn. So it's a fingering weight yarn. And so those 2 yarns are held together up until you get to the stripes. And then what I did is actually marled the stripes. So as I went into the different colors, the colors of the stripes are from Silly Goose Yarns, and it's her Plump fingering. Is it Plump fingering? Yes. In the colors, the first stripe is Coral Reef, the second stripe is Bubblegum, and then the third stripe is Ice Ice Baby. And you can see, I actually bought these at Flock a couple of years ago, and I bought a ton of colors from her because I just thought they were so stunning, but I really can't wear these colors next to me. Like these colors aren't great next to my skin. And so it had just been something that I really, really wanted. I wanted these colors in my wardrobe, but in a way that I could actually make that happen. And that's how this came to be. So we've got the striping just in the middle of the motif, and then it's still predominantly a white sweater. And what else I love about that is that means it's a really good stash buster, because I didn't even use a full skein for each stripe. I hardly used any. I think I used like a 1/4 of a skein for each stripe. And all of the information is in the pattern. But so this, like I said, it's also a raglan, and the raglan uses a slip stitch detail to mimic the slip stitch cable motif. And this is one where I actually wear this a lot now. These were knit a little bit more recent than the last 2, so they don't technically have as many wears in them, but I do grab for this often. It's very comfortable, it's very cozy, and it gives me a little bit of that oversize without feeling too big on my body. One thing I will note is that this was my first sample, and I opted to end up making the sleeves just a tiny, tiny bit smaller. And what I mean by that is I pulled a little bit of fabric out of the sleeves for the pattern, just because I thought there might have been a little extra on here, and you will see that in my next sample. All right, Prismatic Reflection number 2. So this is the one where I honed in on the changes I wanted to make on the pattern, you can see that the sleeve fits just a little bit better. I wanted a snug sleeve. Also, I forgot to mention in the last one I was wearing that I did a rapid decrease on the cuff. I had mentioned earlier, I really like a cinched in cuff. That's just a personal preference to me. I don't always love when there's a big cuff because I feel like especially like if I'm washing my hands or if I'm doing dishes or something, it often gets wet or it hangs in things. This feels like it's just really nicely secure on my arm. And so I have the rapid decrease in there, but there's an option not to. You can choose whether or not you want that cinched in cuff. So this, other than the slightly smaller sleeves, everything else is exactly the same, except that it is more of like a solid. I'm holding two yarns together, but it creates more of a solid fabric, so there's no striping. So the yarn I used, the main color is Lambgood Fibers Classic Fingering in the colorway Nolita, which is this really fun speckled color. It's white base, but it's got a little bit of pink and then some black speckles in it. And then the Suri that I'm holding with it for this one is Fyberspates Cumulus in the colorway Pearl. If you have watched me previously, then you know I'm obsessed with this yarn. This Fyberspates Cumulus is my favorite Suri alpaca. I will use it on everything if I can because it's so beautiful and it's not terribly expensive and you can get them in little 25-gram balls. So it's easy to get exactly as much as you want and you don't have a whole bunch of extra lying around. Now that being said, I always do buy a lot of extra, and so I've actually got every project I've ever done in this, I've got extras of, and I think I need to do like a really dreamy shawl with all of my leftovers because I think that would be amazing. But anyway, so those two yarns together create this beautiful fabric. I do wear this one a lot. It is very comfortable. I will say the one thing is I don't know if together these colors are the best one on my skin tone. So that's the one thing. It's you know, not an issue with anything except that maybe not the best color for me, but it doesn't stop me from wearing it because I just really love it. It's very soft. It feels very wintry. And you know, because you've got the Suri in there, it just feels very warm, much like the previous one with the natural fluff. It is a very warm, very cozy sweater, and if I didn't already say, which I think I did, but this is a DK weight gauge. And so these are my two Prismatic Reflection Sweaters. All right, next up on the list is my Trompet Sweater by Joseé Paquin, I believe. And this pattern is $10 on Ravelry. I have to apologize, it looks like we've got a little bit of a fold line here. I guess when it was stored in my cabinet, it wasn't perfectly folded, so there's a little bit of a crease there. That's just with how it was folded, though. It's not an issue with the sweater itself. So this is a really nice sweater. It's another top-down raglan. As you can see, I have a favorite, I guess. So it's another top-down raglan. It's got a folded over collar. And then also what I really love about this is there is a very subtle cable detail on the raglan increases. And then on top of that, this is meant to have a decent amount of ease. Let me see. So I knit the size 1 to give me 6 inches of positive ease. The pattern calls for 6 to 10 inches of positive ease. And then on top of that, it has kind of a deep armhole and bigger sleeves, which is all intentional. And I knit this with Woolfolk Fleck, which is another absolutely stunning, super soft yarn. Really, really gorgeous. It's maybe one of my softest sweaters ever. And because of that, it also pills like crazy. So I don't know if that's showing up. I don't know if you can see. I can see it very clearly here. I'm not sure if you can. Gorgeous, gorgeous fabric, but pills like crazy. So this pattern comes in 9 sizes, and it ranges from a 40-inch bust up to a 72-inch bust. I actually had to size up my needles to meet gauge on this. I did not meet gauge with the recommended needles. So I ended up using a US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter, and a US 6, which is a 4 millimeter. So the US 6 or 4 millimeter is for the body, the smaller needle is for the ribbing. And actually, yeah, this was the recommended yarn for the pattern. I think it was actually like made for Fleck as like one of the promotional patterns. And so outside of the needle change for gauge, I knit this exactly according to pattern. And this is technically considered a sport weight. I mean, it's decently thick yarn for a sport weight, I have to say. So I feel like sport weight is probably accurate, but in some cases it could probably even be used as a DK, just depending on your gauge. And the color that I used is 4F, which is brown, and it's got really nice little tweedy bits in there. So this is all I have left. And this is a project where I was very much playing yarn chicken, and I was traveling while I was working on it, so there was no way for me to get more yarn. So it was a bit of a dicey situation. And so if I could do it again, I would buy another skein so that I could overall make it longer. You can see if I move my arms at all, the sleeves are a little on the short side. And then it's a quite cropped body. I mean, being that I purposely cropped it so I'd have enough for the sleeves, and then I ended up, I don't know, I guess I was still really worried about the yardage for the sleeves. I don't know why I ended up having this much left. I must have just done the first sleeve thinking that is all, and then I did the second sleeve and had more than I realized. Like I said, I was traveling, so I didn't have all of my tools with me. I don't even think I was able to weigh it. And so there were some things done with this pattern that I wouldn't do again. So I used almost all 7 skeins, which is 1,100 yards. And so in retrospect, I would have bought one more skein, just so I could maybe make it a little bit longer in the sleeves and a smidge longer in the body. With that being said though, it's a really beautiful pattern. I absolutely love this raglan detail. It was written well, it's very easy to knit up. The only other thing I will note with this pattern is just that I have a really hard time figuring out which side is the front and which is the back. Like normally I can tell because there's a deep amount of short rows that I will do in a pattern. With this one, with the recommended amount of short rows, I legitimately, like, I'll line it up and be like, I don't know which is the front and the back. So another thing I would change if I were to do this again is maybe add a few more short rows in it just so I could definitely tell. But it's not enough to be bothersome. Like, I don't feel like it's choking me. It doesn't ever feel like it's too high. It's just one of those things where I'm like, am I wearing the right side? Is this the front or is this the back? I don't know. So that's maybe just something I would note, but it's a very cozy sweater. Yeah, I really think I need to take a gleaner to this. I don't know, I hope you can see that because it looks really matted. It's almost like felted, which makes me wonder if maybe the sleeves are actually shrinking because they're like felting. But yeah, I should take a gleaner to this and see if I can improve it a little bit. It's such a delicate fiber that it pills like kind of immediately. So this is the second Woolfolk project that I've done, and like the yarn is gorgeous. Like, it's ridiculously soft and beautiful, and it's such a joy to work with, but I just don't know if it has the longest lifespan for looking nice, you know, long term. Yeah, if you're gonna use this, definitely keep a gleaner on hand. But yeah, so this is my Trompet sweater. All right, next up on the list, number 6, if we're keeping track, which I don't think I've said the numbers for most of these. But the number 6 on my list is Robinia by Ventzel. So I'm not gonna lie, this was actually, I debated putting this at number 1, but I've technically only worn this a couple of times, and that's only because I just finished it. So if you watched my previous episode, then you saw me talk all about this already. I just finished this last week. And even though I only finished it last week, I've worn it out twice and I've worn it around the house once. I absolutely love this sweater. It was a bit of a labor of love. Not the worst, not the hardest sweater I've ever knit, for sure. But it was so worth it. This is the most over-dramatic, beautiful sweater. I absolutely love it. So let's talk a little bit about it. This is a top-down drop shoulder construction, and it's got a boat neck with a very, very small ribbed detail at the neck, which I really like. It's really clean. It's just a couple of rows, but it's just enough to give it a really nice edging. And all around the ribbing on the cuffs and the hem is very small. There's not a lot of ribbing on this one, and you really don't need it. Those are like the delicate kind of features. Let me see. And then, yeah, it's got like a scalloped colorwork detail. Obviously, that's the main event here. I knit the size 3 to achieve about the fit of a size 1. I used, what did I use? I used Illimani Amelie in Hunter Green and Bone. And so these are bulky weight yarns. The pattern is technically listed as bulky, but I would say realistically it's actually more of a super bulky, because she holds 3 yarns together, and one of those yarns is a bulky. And so when you combine all of that, it's really more of a super bulky weight gauge. So I think her gauge was 16 stitches per 4 inches, and I got 18 stitches per 4 inches. But I was able to match her row gauge, which made all of this much easier for me. I didn't have to do a ton of math. Most of the math was just in the width. So, this pattern only comes in 5 sizes, and they range from 100 centimeters up to 140 centimeters, which is 39 inches up to 55 inches. So there aren't a ton of sizes here. And then the recommended ease is a little confusing because she wears 2 different samples and they have 2 different amounts of ease. So I guess it's really just kind of like you pick which one you'd prefer. But it looks like it kind of recommends about 10.5 inches of ease, and I ended up getting about 8 inches of ease, and I couldn't be happier with the amount of ease, with the fit. I just think this is just gorgeous. It also, I didn't mention, but it's got a very dramatic sleeve, which is actually technically just knit straight, and then you do a couple of semi-rapid decreases right before the cuff. And it gives you this really nice dramatic sleeve, but then the cuff comes in, but it's still enough to where you can kind of like grab it. And I find that that's what I'll do when I'm wearing it, is just kind of like grab it like this. And so it feels super cozy, but it also feels really nice. Like I wore this out to a nice dinner, and then I wore this out to meet a friend for coffee. So it's just one of those statement piece sweaters that you can be really cozy, but you can also look like $1,000,000. And I think the yarn definitely plays a role here. This yarn is incredible. So it's blown yarn, and then it's got the silk core, and then it's mostly baby alpaca fibers, and then there's a little bit of merino, but that, like between the baby alpaca and the silk, you get a really nice drape to it. It's not too stiff, even though it's a bulky weight yarn. And I think that actually says a lot, because it's actually why I'm sometimes hesitant to knit bulky sweaters, because you don't want this like stiff, big piece of fabric. If you're gonna do bulky, I feel like you kind of need a little bit more room to work with, so it's not just like a stiff piece of fabric. And you'll see I've got an upcoming sweater where I kind of have that problem. What else about this pattern? So I used her recommended needles, which were US 7, which is 4.5 millimeters, and US 8, which is 5 millimeters. Obviously, smaller needle for the ribbing, larger needle for the body. And the only, let's see, outside of the size, the only modification that I made was that the sleeves also have instructions for short rows, I guess to give you a little bit more fabric up here. I opted not to do those, mostly because I didn't read the instructions right, but also because I wouldn't have wanted that anyway. And I feel like the sleeves are so dramatic, you don't need it. But if you want extra drama, then you can do the short rows for that. If I could do anything differently, I don't think I would, actually. I knit this exactly the way I wanted. There are short rows in the front and the back, which mean that the boat neck sits really nicely. I feel like this sits at the part of my neck that does not bother me at all. It's just low enough. And then it probably also doesn't hurt that the fabric is so soft that I don't even notice where this hits me at the neck. And it works in a way to where it sort of leans forward into your shoulders. So I think the short row shaping that was done on this pattern are really nice. My gripes would be that there aren't a few more size options, because I don't think it would be that difficult to do. It's only an 8-stitch repeat in the motif. And then also like the first 3 or 4 sizes, this whole stitch amount here for the upper body was the same, which is weird. It's very weird. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's easy enough for you to modify. You could easily add more stitches to that or less. I guess it was a stylistic choice, but I do just want to mention that if you are interested in this pattern, that I wouldn't knit this pattern unless you're okay with doing a little bit of knitting math, just because it's possible that you might need to make some adjustments to some of the stitch counts to better fit you, which is what I had to do. And I'm happy with it. I also went in knowing that because I didn't meet gauge, so I had to do some math anyway. But if you are willing to do a little bit of math, which I think it's good to be able to do those things. I think it's a really good skill to have, because if you're making your clothes, you know, you can buy a pattern and follow it to the best of your ability, but each designer is going to have particular fit options that work really well for them. It's not often that you find a designer that does a different range of things for different body types. Typically, they are designing for their body type and then designing up and down in that size range. So there's always the chance that you might want to make modifications, like you might want to do waist shaping, you might want to do bust darts, you might want to add more just to the neck or more in the sleeves or whatever it may be, just based on your body type. So I do think it's a good skill to have and worth doing. If you go into a pattern knowing that you're okay to make some modifications, I think it makes the pattern a little bit less scary. So that is just the recommendation I would make for the Robinia. But even with that, I really love this sweater, and I've gotten a ton of compliments on it. I actually, like, every time I've worn it out, I've gotten compliments on it. So yeah, this is a great one. I expect that this will actually rise in the ranks and become one of my most worn sweaters. All right, now we're starting to get into my least worn. I actually really like the way this looks, but there are some things about there are some things about this finished object that lead me to not wear it as much as some of my other ones that you've seen. So this is the Felix Pullover by Christoffers. This pattern is $7 on Ravelry, and this is a top-down raglan with some really beautiful eyelet motifs on the raglan increases. And it's got a nice big open neckline. And this is, let me see, I think this is an Aran weight gauge. The yarn I used is technically a heavy worsted. It is the Soft Donegal by Studio Donegal in the colorway Barfight, which I think is so fun. So it's a dark purple, and then it's got all of these colored flecks in it, which what it reminds me of, I don't know, I don't know if any of you guys did this as kids, but I remember as a kid, I would take my crayons and do like a rainbow of all of the different colors on a piece of paper, and then I would go over that rainbow in black crayon. I would cover the entire thing with black crayon on top, and then you would like sketch out, you would just take like a really sharp pencil and draw, and then you'd have all the colors behind it. That's what this reminds me of. And I just really love it. I love that it's got tweedy bits, but they're all really vibrant, colorful tweedy bits. And then the purple, I think, is really beautiful. It's a really nice purple. I knit the size 1 mostly because this was another yarn chicken situation. So this pattern recommends, the range of positive ease is quite big. So it recommends between 2 to 10 inches of positive ease. I knit the size 1 because I only had 4 skeins of this yarn in stash, which was 840 yards. So I had this yarn in stash and was basically looking for a project that I could make. This was gifted to me. It was given to me by a friend as a present, and I loved the yarn, but 4 skeins of it wasn't quite enough to do most of the sweaters I had in mind. So I was able to make this sweater, but only in the size small. And I was able to get a good length and everything, But I do wonder, I mean, I actually like the way that this looks on me. I like the amount of ease, but I think there's just something about the thickness of the gauge where I feel like this should have a little bit more ease to it and maybe be a little bit more oversized. The other reason why I don't wear this a ton is, I will admit fully that I think I have very sensitive skin. So for a lot of you, this will not be an issue, I suspect. But for me, this yarn is a little bit itchy. It's not crazy, it's not really bad. And I think the big part of it is it has to be really cold. When it's cold and I put this on, I'm comfortable. But if it's a little bit warm, like even right now, I just feel like a twinge on my arms. Like it's not even uncomfortable. It's just that I know there is wool on my skin. Do you know what I mean? Where you just have that feeling where you're like, I'll be fine with it, but I'll be happy to take this off at the end of the day. And so unfortunately, I don't just throw this on. Like it's not something where I would go hang out for a few hours and not be worried about being uncomfortable. Like I would probably be just kind of pulling at it a little bit just because of that. However, this pattern was an absolute delight to knit. This knit up incredibly fast and it was really fun. I really love the eyelet motif. And it's a very simple pattern, like it's mostly stockinette, but then you get those little details there. And I just think it's really quite pretty. Yeah, the other thing that I want to mention about this yarn, it's actually come a long way and I can wear it now and it's fine. I don't know if it had to do with wherever this yarn came from, like what store it was in, or if it was in a warehouse, or if it's the yarn itself, because the yarn did have some like little hay bits and things in it. My allergies were insane while I was knitting up this sweater. Like every time I grabbed this out of my bag and started knitting on it, I would sneeze like crazy. My face would get all puffy and my eyes would get red and everything was runny. Like I was incredibly allergic to this yarn. So I was actually really worried that I was never gonna be able to wear this at all. So I ended up doing 2 full soaks on this before I even wore it. So I did a deep soak with like really hot water and a ton of soak wool wash. And then after it was done, I actually rinsed it. Like the soak is a no rinse wool wash, but with this one, I rinsed it out in cold water very delicately. And then I soaked it again with soak wool wash again. And then I let it dry and it's fine. So whatever it was, maybe it was just really dusty yarn. Maybe it was all of the hay bits and maybe I got a lot of that like vegetable matter out. I'm not sure. You can still see a lot of it, but I don't know, maybe I got like the worst of it out. I'm not sure, but needless to say, I don't have allergies anymore when I wear this, which is great. So, you know, maybe keep that in mind if you get this, but that could have just been a one-off. But this, again, I would recommend this pattern. This was a really great pattern. It's a really fun, quick knit, and it's something where you can do quite a bulky yarn and get a sweater really fast. And so if I knit this pattern again, I'd probably go up a size. Although also just by doing, like I said, this is a heavy worsted and the pattern calls for an Aran weight. Now I'm pretty sure I met gauge. I used the recommended needle sizes, which were a US 10, which is 5mm, and a US 8, which is 5mm, and the US 10, which is 6mm. So one thing to note, because I think it's because the positive ease range is so big, there weren't a ton of sizes. This one also only has 5 sizes, and it ranges from a 39-inch bust to a 57-inch bust finished. So it could go a little higher. And actually, I'm surprised that there aren't more sizes because I know this is a really popular pattern and I know a lot of people have knit this. And I mean, it would be easy to modify it up if you wanted to knit a larger size. It's, at least my version, it fits very close. Like it's got nice small sleeves. Now that I'm thinking of it, I actually think I increased I increased my armhole depth because when I got to the recommended armhole depth, it was very shallow. And I was really surprised about that because I was actually meeting row gauge. So I ended up needing to add a bit of length to the raglan, like the armhole depth. And even with that, you can see that it's quite a tight fitting sleeve on me. So that is one thing to note as well, that I think maybe just keep in mind you might want to increase armhole depth just a smidge on that. But otherwise, it's a nice sweater. It's a shame I don't wear it more. I think if I wear something underneath, it helps a little bit, but also the fact that the sleeves are kind of tight on my skin, it just means that it's not one that I grab for. Now, when it's really cold out and I need to bundle up, I would definitely wear this. But otherwise, I would probably knit this again in a slightly softer fabric, but maybe one that's not so soft that it pills. So it's all about finding that happy medium in yarn for your skin and what feels comfortable for you. All right, we are on the last one. So this is number 8, and this is my Sorrel Sweater by Wool and Pine. It's a top-down yoke sweater, and it's got these dip stitches on the yoke, which are kind of, if you are familiar with the Sorrel line, I know there are a few of them now, that's kind of the main thing. And I know a lot of people will actually do like a fade on the yoke into the body holding like different colors together. I opted to just do a uniform color throughout. One of my favorite things about this sweater is the yarn that I picked. I knit the size 2, which they recommend 0 to 6 inches of positive ease. So you can see that there's not a ton of ease. And yeah, that's with the size 2. So I want to say, yeah, there are 10 sizes on this. So there is a nice range in sizes there. The range is from 31.5 inches up to a 66 inch. So I guess it's very small increments that the patterns adjust in. And then I use the recommended needle sizes, which is a US 3, which is a 3.25 millimeter, and US 5, which is a 3.75 millimeter needle. And this creates a DK weight gauge. So the yarn that I used, these yarns, I feel like together the yarns made such a gorgeous color. So coming back at you with another polka dot sheep iron horse, and this is in the color Juneberry, which is absolutely incredible and dynamic. The purples in there are just amazing. And I used, is that right? Yeah, apparently I only used 2 skeins, which is 876 yards. And then the yarn I held with it is, again, Fyberspates Cumulus, and this is in the color Plum, and I used 5 1/4 balls, which are 860 yards. So, why is this last on my list? Well, it's a shame actually, because it feels really beautiful. The fabric is really, really nice. I love the color, like absolutely love it. But the fit isn't my favorite. So there are a few things. So for starters, there are no short rows. In retrospect, if I were to knit this again, I would add short rows. I would just add them myself, either to the back ribbing or just add in the panel and then begin the dip stitches. It's in the back, so you wouldn't notice it, especially with a round yoke. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the depth of the yoke. So, and this is something that you have to be careful with yokes, with round yoke sweaters, because depending on the depth that you have and depending on what's going on in the yoke, that kind of determines how your armhole is going to be shaped and how everything is going to fit. And I think there's a fine balance, and at least for my version, it's been several years since I made this, so I would like to actually look at some other people's samples and see if this is a common issue. My issue is that the sleeve is quite tight and the armhole depth is a little bit long in comparison. Like, I don't actually have a huge issue with the armhole depth as it is if the sleeve were maybe a little bit roomier, but the fact that the sleeve is so snug, it just feels like it adds even more emphasis to this area. Like if it's this is what I don't love, this shape where I've got these like tiny little tube sleeves, and then there's that bulk that's happening there. So if I were to go back and fix this, I would probably just increase some of the sleeve stitch count, and I think I'd be happier with that because the sleeves are actually quite tight, and I find myself wishing that they weren't so. And I know that some of that is just modern changes in patterns, like sleeves are kind of a little bit bigger now than they used to be. And, you know, like I said, I knit this several years ago, and so maybe at the time it didn't bother me a ton, but I think just the balance feels off. Like when I do that, it just feels like you've got this bulk from where the yoke is, and then it's just like really tight there, and then it like tapers in because of that. And so those are the things that make me not reach for this all the time. Now, that being said, I mean, this is still a beautiful pattern. One thing to note too, you might have noticed that the bulk of this is in reverse stockinette. And you know, you have to do that because you've got these dip stitches here, and then you've got reverse stockinette all through here. But once you get to the body, you actually knit it inside out, so you're not actually purling the whole thing. Just wanted to note that if that was a deterrent for some people. But yeah, I mean, especially when you add the Suri to it, it gives a nice fuzz to where I don't typically love the reverse side of stockinette, but anytime you make it fuzzy, I don't mind it because then you're not really looking at the stitch definition. And this combination, it's so beautiful. I can't get over it. Every time I pull this sweater out, I think to myself, I should wear it more. I do kind of, I don't know if I'll go back and modify it, but I do kind of wish that maybe I could do some adjustments to it to wear it just a little bit more. It makes me wonder if maybe I should just do this yarn combination in something else. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, all said and done, it was one of those patterns that I was really excited to have, and then once I finished it, I just felt like there were just a few things that kept me from really loving the sweater. And so even though it's really soft and it's really cozy, it's not itchy at all, the color is really beautiful, it's just one that I literally never grabbed for. I made it several years ago. I've worn it a handful of times. I think it's okay if I kind of stay like this, but otherwise I just really don't love the fit. So keep that in mind, that, you know, the yoke and the armhole depth might be something that maybe you want to tweak if you knit this yourself. But otherwise, you know, it's nothing bad to say in terms of like there are a good range of sizes. It looks like, you know, and it's also possible that this has had some updates since I knit it, because I will say, I don't know if when I knit this, it had 10 sizes. That I looked back on Ravelry to see that, and that seemed a little bit surprising to me. So it is possible that maybe this has been updated since. So keep that in mind. Okay, well, those were my 8 most and least worn cozy winter knit sweaters. Thank you so much for watching if you stuck around to the end. If you have knit any of these and you have different opinions or other things that you wanted to mention, please definitely let me know in the comments below. And if you have any questions about any of the patterns I knit, feel free to leave me a question here. You can also check out my Ravelry. I have left decent notes in most of them. I feel like as the years have gone by, my notes have gotten a little bit less meticulous. I end up just like jotting it down on my pattern printout or like in whatever notes app I'm doing. So yeah, definitely let me know if you've got any questions about any of those. And if you would like to get in touch with me, I am meeshyfrazz on Instagram and Ravelry. You can email me at meeshyfrazz@gmail.com, and you can find me at my blog, which is meeshyfrazzknits.com. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday, and I will see you next time. Bye.